contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9.
We have breaking news. Malaysia Airlines confirms it has lost contact with a plane carrying 227 passengers.
It seems to have vanished into thin air.
What do we tell the family members? What do we tell the media?
For over a decade, the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has haunted the world. It was a vanishing act of impossible scale, spawning countless conspiracy theories, billions of dollars in failed searches, and unimaginable heartbreak. For hundreds of families, a plane, 239 souls gone, just vanished into thin air. What do you tell the family members? What do you tell the media? For years, all anyone could say was, "We don't know." But now, a new chilling chapter is unfolding. Scientists have made a discovery so shocking, so bizarre, it has sent a jolt of raw panic through the entire aviation world. This isn't a theory. This isn't a rumor. This is real. And what scientists just found inside Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has shattered everything we thought we knew, leaving the world reeling. It was supposed to be just another routine red-eye flight, utterly uneventful. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a Boeing 777-200ER, gracefully lifted off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m. local time, bound for Beijing Capital International Airport. On board were 239 people, business travelers, eager tourists, young families, bright-eyed students, even tiny infants, alongside a highly experienced flight crew. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, out of the ordinary in those first routine moments. The plane reached its cruising altitude and air traffic control smoothly handed over responsibility to Vietnam. But then, an eerie radio silence. MH370 never checked in. At 1:21 a.m., the aircraft's transponder suddenly stopped transmitting, and it vanished from civilian radar without a trace. But military radar still had eyes on it for a little while longer. And what they saw was baffling, chillingly impossible. Instead of continuing toward China, MH370 made a sharp, inexplicable turn westward. It flew back over the Malay Peninsula, skirted the very edges of Thai and Malaysian airspace, then veered sharply south over the vast Andaman Sea and plunged into the terrifying immensity of the southern Indian Ocean, and then it was gone. No mayday, no emergency call, no signs of mechanical failure, just profound, terrifying silence. Within hours, frantic families gathered in Beijing and Kuala Lumpur, staring at arrival boards frozen in time, watching their loved ones' names remained tragically unclaimed. Panic, then confusion set in, but no one, absolutely no one, could have imagined just how deep this mystery would go, or how agonizingly long it would last. The world responded with a raw sense of urgency, but also with profound disbelief. Within days, an unprecedented multinational search operation was furiously underway. More than 24 nations, Australia, China, the US, the UK, France, India, Japan, and many others joined forces, offering naval ships, advanced aircraft, cutting-edge satellites, and deep-sea submersibles. The initial search radius spanned thousands of kilometers, from the South China Sea to the Strait of Malacca. But when MH370's satellite handshake data, those ghostly Inmarsat pings indicated the plane had likely flown south over the remote Indian Ocean, all attention, all hope abruptly shifted, and so began what would become one of the largest and most astronomically expensive search operations in aviation history, costing over $160 million and relentlessly scouring over 120,000 square kilometers of remote, unforgiving ocean. But the sea, in all its ancient, indifferent majesty, gave nothing back. No floating debris, no telltale oil slicks, no fuselage, not a single sign of impact. Search teams meticulously mapped the ocean floor in high definition, revealing terrain previously unseen by human eyes. Yet it was as if the plane had slipped into a different dimension entirely. "This is impossible," air traffic controllers murmured, their voices laced with disbelief. "This can't happen," echoed aviation experts baffled. "It's 2014. We track packages better than planes." For the families waiting in Beijing, Kuala Lumpur, and across the globe, the agonizing absence of answers was its own unique kind of torment. Each passing day brought a soul-crushing mix of grief, fleeting false leads, rampant conspiracy theories, and government statements that said so little, yet meant so much. And then came the haunting, unanswerable questions. How could a 250-ton aircraft simply vanish? As the search dragged on and global confidence waned, wild speculation aggressively took center stage. With no cockpit voice recorder, no flight data, recorder, and no visible wreckage, all that remained was chilling theory. Some pointed the finger at the pilot, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a man with over 18,000 hours of flying experience, initially praised by colleagues, but later relentlessly scrutinized by investigators. A home flight simulator found in his residence contained route data eerily similar to MH370's final known trajectory. Was this a premeditated act? Was it a suicide mission, a horrific final flight? Others posited a massive, sudden mechanical failure, followed by a slow, insidious decompression that rendered all on board unconscious. A ghost flight, silently drifting on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and plunged silently into the sea. But not all explanations stayed within the comforting realm of science. Some desperate minds imagined a hijacking cloaked in impossible silence. Others suspected a sophisticated cyber attack where someone remotely took control of the aircraft's systems. And then came the whispers, the truly chilling whispers. A Black Ops mission gone wrong. Military involvement covered up, even for some alien abduction. Yet no matter the theory, all roads led to agonizing frustration, and the handling of the crisis by Malaysian authorities only compounded the torment. Officials were notoriously slow to release crucial radar data. Information came in frustrating fragments and often directly contradicted earlier official statements. Some nations openly accused Malaysia of deliberately withholding information. There were undeniable delays in organizing the search, a palpable hesitation in publicly acknowledging the plane's shocking change in course, and a distinct reluctance to pursue pilot culpability. This crushing lack of transparency shattered public trust, replacing it with suspicion. For the families, every news briefing was a fresh wound, ripped open again. For aviation analysts, it was a complex jigsaw puzzle with too many missing pieces. For the public, MH370 became a chilling case study in modern mystery, one with no clear villain, no closure, and no ending. And yet, for the world, that was only the beginning. When the world's attention began to wane and official search efforts were reluctantly suspended, it was a private American marine exploration company, Ocean Infinity, that defiantly refused to let the trail go cold. In 2018, they embarked on a mission that many deemed futile, chasing shadows in the darkest, most unreachable corners of the planet, the abyssal depths of the southern Indian Ocean. But unlike previous efforts, they came equipped with an arsenal of truly cutting-edge technology, deploying a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, robotic explorers untethered from surface ships. They began meticulously scanning the ocean floor with ultra-high-resolution synthetic aperture sonar. These machines moved like ghostly sentinels, hundreds of meters below the surface, silently mapping the terrain of a world so alien and hostile it may as well have been another planet entirely. The data began to pour in. Ghost ships, long lost and forgotten from centuries past, eerily emerged from the sediment like skeletal remains. Towering geological ridges and deep abyssal trenches, some previously uncharted, were revealed. Stark evidence of the Earth's raw, violent tectonic activity. It was as if they were uncovering the very history of time itself, layer by silent layer. But not a single piece of flight MH370, no wings, no fuselage, no black box ping, nothing that could definitively say, this is where it ended. Each day spent at sea felt like plunging deeper into the unknown, not just geographically, but metaphysically. It was as if the ocean, in all its ancient, indifferent majesty, had swallowed the aircraft whole and sealed its secrets with unimaginable pressure and eternal darkness. Then came a moment that reignited both desperate hope and profound dread. The sonar systems began detecting anomalies, thousands of them, littering the ocean floor like scattered bones. Pieces of wreckage, cargo, luggage. The operators held their breath, their hearts pounding. But as they zoomed in on the digital reconstructions, their hopes cruelly plummeted. None of the objects matched the materials, structure, or design of a Boeing 777. There were no identifying numbers, no familiar fragments, no human traces. Just an eerie, undecipherable spread of debris that told a story no one could decipher. "This is impossible," one of the crew members whispered, echoing the haunting sentiment felt across the control room. How could a jetliner, one of the most sophisticated pieces of modern engineering, vanish so completely, leaving behind only silence and confusion? The mystery deepened, not just of where the plane went, but how the Earth itself could hide it so well. The search had uncovered wonders and horrors beneath the waves, but the one answer everyone sought remained just out of reach, floating somewhere between the cold lines of science and the unsettling realm of the supernatural. And in the vast indifferent silence of the deep sea, that answer still waited, yet whispers of new clues emerged from the depths. In July 2015, a tangible breakthrough in the mystery of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 seemed to surface, quite literally on the shores of Réunion Island, a remote French territory in the Indian Ocean. A local beach cleaner stumbled upon a peculiar metallic object partially buried in the sand. Authorities would later confirm it to be a flaperon, a movable control surface attached to the wing of a Boeing 777. It was the first physical evidence definitively linked to the missing aircraft since its disappearance in March 2014. This discovery electrified investigators and reignited global interest in the agonizing search. The flaperon's condition told a story of its own. It bore undeniable signs of heavy water impact, consistent with high-speed contact with the ocean, but it was also curiously intact, suggesting it may have detached from the aircraft before. The final breakup. This detail hinted at the disturbing possibility of a controlled descent, or at least something far more complex than a simple catastrophic crash. In the months and years that followed, more fragments began washing ashore along coastlines scattered across the western Indian Ocean, Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa. Over 20 pieces were eventually identified or deemed highly likely to belong to MH370. These parts range from interior cabin panels to sections of the tail and engine cowling. Some were jagged, almost violently torn, as though sheared off by immense pressure. Others had smoother separations, possibly the result of structural fatigue or prolonged exposure to the elements. The sheer variety of damage only deepened the mystery. What kind of end could produce such inconsistent wreckage? But it wasn't just the debris itself that deeply intrigued scientists. It was what clung to it. Many of the pieces were encrusted with barnacles, specifically Lapis anatifera, a species that only survives in particular sea temperatures and depths. Marine biologists saw an unprecedented opportunity. By meticulously analyzing the size, growth rate, and distribution of these barnacles, they hoped to estimate how long the wreckage had been drifting, and possibly even reverse engineer the debris trail back to a potential crash site. This field of study, biofouling analysis, is painstaking and complex. Growth rings on barnacle shells, much like the rings of a tree, can provide crucial time frames, but ocean currents in the southern Indian Ocean are notoriously erratic. Gyres, eddies, and seasonal drifts can scatter wreckage across unimaginably vast distances, making precise calculations nearly impossible. While the barnacles offered a faint, tantalizing whisper of truth, it wasn't enough to speak the plane's final coordinates aloud. The ocean, as it turned out, was a master of concealment. Despite these physical clues, this immense body of water stubbornly refused to yield the ultimate answer. Where exactly did MH370 go down? Each piece of wreckage became both a momentary revelation and a persistent riddle. For every question it seemed to answer, it tragically raised three more. Was the plane gliding when it hit? Did it disintegrate at altitude? Was the pilot in control until the very last moment? Investigators, journalists, and the tormented families of passengers clung to each new find with desperate hope, but the trail never led to the fuselage, the black boxes, or the hundreds of souls still missing. A decade later, the flaperon remains. One of the most symbolic artifacts of MH370, haunting, silent, and heavy with the unbearable weight of all that remains unknown. And as for the ocean, it continues to hold its secrets beneath the shifting waves, indifferent to the questions echoing above. Then came the year 2025. By the dawn of this new year, the agonizing mystery of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 had haunted the world for over a decade. The impossible loss of 239 souls aboard the Boeing 777 had become not just a tragedy, but a chilling symbol of modern aviation's blind spots. How a massive, technologically advanced aircraft could vanish without a trace in the very heart of the satellite age. Ocean Infinity, the US-based ocean exploration company, had been involved before, chasing shadows in the deep. But this time, things were profoundly different. Armed with next-generation autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, equipped with AI-assisted sonar mapping, and a decade's worth of refined satellite data, the team launched what was quietly called the Final Sweep. This renewed mission wasn't just another attempt. It was a culmination of technological evolution, international desperation, and a whisper of hope that never quite died. Central to this new search were the revised drift models, hyper-advanced simulations painstakingly created from thousands of data points, including complex sea current behavior, subtle weather anomalies, and marine object drift analytics, all refined over 10 painstaking years. These models suggested something startling. The aircraft's likely resting place was just outside the original search grid, a narrow band of the southern Indian Ocean that had been tragically overlooked due to early assumptions and bureaucratic blind spots. Initially, the Malaysian government hesitated, their fear palpable. Internal debates raged, and officials feared another astronomically expensive dead end would further tarnish their already fragile reputation. But then something shifted. A series of bombshell internal reports began circulating online, leaked from within. These reports indicated that critical satellite ping analysis from Inmarsat had been quietly updated in 2019, suggesting they might have missed a key inflection point in the so-called 7th arc. Public pressure exploded. Families of the victims, journalists, and aviation experts called for immediate accountability. Their voices a roar. Under mounting scrutiny, and with few other options remaining, the Malaysian government reluctantly gave Ocean Infinity the green light. And so, the search began. For weeks, the AUVs meticulously combed the ocean floor in silence, gliding along trenches deeper than Everest is tall. Each return to the surface brought data more detailed than anything previously recorded. 3D topography so rich it could spot a shoelace in the silt. Yet the first agonizing weeks brought only familiar geological formations, sunken shipping containers, and frustrating false alarms. Then came the ping. At approximately 3 to 47 UTC on March 11th, one of the AUVs flagged an anomaly, an object far larger, far more symmetrical than anything else recorded in that sector. When the sonar imagery was reviewed, the room reportedly fell silent, a collective gasp. There it was, the unmistakable outline of a wide-body jetliner resting eerily upright on the ocean floor. Its fuselage, shockingly, was intact, wings partially detached but undeniably present, the tail section embedded in silt but clearly visible. The distinct curvature of the aircraft's nose matched Boeing's 777 profile with terrifying precision. No one dared to confirm it. Not yet. The ocean had played cruel tricks before, but this felt different. This wasn't scattered debris. This was a grave site, undisturbed for a decade, frozen in time. The discovery sent shockwaves around the globe, reverberating through every newsroom, every home. Within hours, satellite feeds picked up increased traffic near the search zone. Ocean Infinity maintained a rigid radio silence, requesting time for painstaking verification, but word had already, inevitably, leaked. Social media lit up with a frenzy of hope and dread. Families of victims gathered in vigils, some clutching photographs faded with time, others simply staring at the sea. For many, this wasn't closure. It was reopening a wound they'd spent years trying to stitch shut, a new, unbearable torment. What followed was a cascade of haunting questions. How had this area been so critically overlooked for so long? Why was the aircraft so impossibly far off course? And chillingly, why was it so intact? And perhaps most haunting of all, why now? The 2025 search didn't just bring the world closer to an answer, it redefined the very nature of what it means to lose something in the modern age. It reminded us that even in a world bathed in data, the ocean still holds secrets. And some of those secrets, it seems, were just waiting for us to look again. The sonar readings had hinted at something anomalous, metallic, unusually symmetrical, but when the high-resolution imaging finally came in, all doubts instantly vanished. The structure, partially buried in a soft blanket of oceanic silt, revealed a silhouette that sent shivers down the spine of the entire command center. It was a Boeing 777, unmistakable even in its ghostly state. The right wing had sheared off, resting several meters away, but the fuselage, long, cylindrical, battered, remained remarkably intact. Stenciled markings, though weathered by salt and time, aligned perfectly with the flight manifest. The numbers on the landing gear doors matched the serial registry of Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370. There was no longer any room for speculation. This was it. After years of speculation, of desperate theories, and of failed searches across vast, empty swaths of ocean, the impossible had finally materialized. Over a crackling satellite link, the lead systems engineer leaned in closer to the screen, his voice barely audible as raw emotion choked it into a whisper. "This is impossible!" His words echoed through the control room, reverberating with profound awe and utter disbelief. The room fell into a stunned silence, each person present gripped by the sheer, overwhelming realization of what they were witnessing. The greatest aviation mystery of the 21st century had just taken a dramatic, terrifying turn. The discovery site, some 4,000 meters below sea level, lay in a trench previously thought too remote and unstable to survey. Strong, unforgiving underwater currents had perfectly concealed it for over a decade. But now, with the help of next-gen scanning technology and advanced deep-sea mapping drones, the truth had clawed its way back from the abyss. Remote operated. Submersibles were immediately deployed. As the first descended, the world watched via livestream from the mission's classified operations center. The camera feed flickered, then stabilized, offering a chilling, panoramic view of the wreckage. Seats were still bolted in place, some torn fabric fluttering ever so gently in the cold underwater currents. Others were empty, lifeless, mere shadows of the passengers who once filled them, but some still bore faded headrest covers, the Malaysia Airlines logo barely visible through a thin film of sediment. Personal belongings, shoes, headphones, a child's plush toy floated listlessly near the cabin floor, a time-frozen gallery of ordinary lives, now part of something extraordinary and tragically macabre. But then came the part that chilled the world to its core. Inside the forward galley section, the submersible camera picked up what initially looked like a collapsed storage unit. As it zoomed in, however, it became horrifyingly clear. The cockpit door was sealed from the inside, and within the cockpit, something even more unexplainable came into terrifying focus. The co-pilot seat was empty, but the captain's seat still held a form, a uniform, a skeleton, hands still resting on the control yoke. The oxygen mask dangled just inches from his jaw. The world had finally found MH370, but in doing so, opened a new mystery even deeper than the ocean it was buried in. When recovery crews finally managed to access the most intact portion of the fuselage, the expectations were grim but clear. They anticipated finding undeniable evidence that could offer some measure of closure. Instead, what they uncovered only deepened the mystery, twisting it into something far more sinister. Inside the aircraft, the interior was a chilling time capsule, miraculously preserved by the cold ocean depths and layers of silt. But even here, something was profoundly off. Only 12 sets of human remains were found, a shockingly minuscule number. Far fewer than the total number of passengers and crew aboard. Experts were utterly baffled. The aircraft had carried 239 people, yet less than 5% of the bodies were accounted for. Where were the rest? Ocean currents might explain some loss, but certainly not to this impossible extent. Forensic analysts began to whisper about other, more terrifying possibilities, once too dark to be spoken aloud without irrefutable evidence. Sections of the passenger cabin showed unmistakable signs of explosive decompression, a sudden, violent rupture, likely caused by a high-pressure failure, or more chillingly, a deliberate blast. The walls were warped outward with horrific force, and seatbelts had been violently torn loose from their anchor points. Several tray tables were found, embedded in the backs of seats, turned into deadly projectiles in a chaotic few seconds of unspeakable terror. But it was the cockpit that raised the most alarming, most damning questions. The cockpit door appeared to have been sealed from the inside. This meant that either the pilots locked themselves in intentionally, or more ominously, someone took over and ensured no one else could enter. There were deep scratch marks near the electronic lock, possibly made in desperate, futile attempts to gain entry. Investigators recovered one of the 2 flight data recorders, but it was eerily incomplete. The outer casing was mostly intact, but the memory module, the very heart of the black box, was either catastrophically damaged beyond repair, or more chillingly, deliberately removed. It was like discovering a journal with every critical page torn out. The second recorder, the cockpit voice recorder, remained stubbornly missing. Then came perhaps the most disturbing detail of all. Behind one of the rear cabin panels, an electrical maintenance bay showed undeniable signs of deliberate tampering. The wiring harnesses had been meticulously stripped in places. Some of them were crudely spliced or rerouted. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for and where. It wasn't vandalism. It was precise, calculated, and terrifyingly deliberate. And tucked behind the panel, soaked through but miraculously legible in places, was a handwritten note. Its ink had bled from water exposure, but some words could still be deciphered. Authorities have to this day refused to publicly release the full text, citing ongoing forensic analysis, a silence that screams volumes. Shortly after the aircraft was partially recovered, whistleblowers began to emerge from inside international aviation agencies, from the private satellite companies, even from contractors involved in the initial 2014 search. They all hinted at a similar horrifying narrative that crucial early evidence had been systematically withheld, deliberately redirected, or outright ignored. According to one former analyst, satellite images taken just days after the disappearance showed large, linear debris patterns in the southern Indian Ocean, but these were dismissed as mere wave shadows or false positives. Some of those images, the analyst vehemently claimed, were never publicly released. They had been locked away under classified status, protected by layers of international agreements. This revelation caused immediate, widespread outrage. Families of the victims, already tortured by a decade of uncertainty, demanded to know, why hadn't these areas been searched earlier? Why were these images hidden? And who had the power to suppress them? Public outcry intensified when Joe Rogan addressed the case on his immensely popular podcast, bringing the mystery back into the mainstream, forcing it into every living room. If this was covered up, even slightly, he said, pausing for chilling effect, the world deserves to know. We're talking about 239 souls. Somebody's hiding something, and it's not just some paperwork mistake. The episode went viral, sparking a wave of renewed, furious interest from journalists, former pilots, and amateur investigators worldwide. Rogan's undeniable influence pushed the case back into the unforgiving spotlight, reigniting demands for full and complete disclosure. The global response was nothing short of seismic. Within hours of the findings being broadcast, landmarks across the world were bathed in blue and white, the haunting colors of Malaysia Airlines. From Sydney's iconic Opera House to the majestic Eiffel Tower, candles were lit not just in remembrance of the 239 souls lost, but also in renewed solidarity with their families who had waited over a decade for answers that never came. In Kuala Lumpur, streets swelled with mourners, a sea of somber faces. Some held portraits of missing loved ones, now faded with time, but never ever forgotten. A choir of schoolchildren sang a haunting rendition of In the Arms of the Angels. Outside the Petronas Towers, as a soft rain fell, almost as if the sky itself was grieving, major networks immediately shifted programming. Primetime documentaries, retrospective panels, and newly unearthed interviews with former aviation investigators and distraught relatives dominated the airwaves. Analysts pointed to the recovered contents with a mix of awe, profound confusion, and most alarmingly, undeniable fear. Because this wasn't just about a plane crash anymore. This was about something infinitely darker. If MH370 was found, why was it so impossibly far off course? Nearly 4,000 miles from its expected trajectory, the aircraft was located in one of the most remote and least mapped regions of the Indian Ocean basin. The area had already been searched, or so the world thought. Was the plane deliberately moved? Or had someone gone to unimaginably great lengths to conceal it for a decade? And what of the remains? Despite the wreckage being largely intact, only a handful of partial remains were recovered. Forensic teams are utterly baffled. Some speculate extreme heat or aggressive deep-sea scavengers. Others suggest something far more sinister: controlled disposal, evidence tampering, a meticulous cleanup that took years to orchestrate. Then there's the aircraft itself. Black box data appeared to have been wiped clean. Key systems were either corrupted or deliberately disabled. Internal components, including critical communication modules, had been manually disconnected by hand. This wasn't the random, chaotic work of a crash. It was the precise, calculated work of a deliberate cover-up. The search may finally be over, but the mystery has only deepened, twisting into a profound, terrifying enigma. Could this shocking discovery finally bring closure, or will it only plunge us further into the darkest, most unsettling corners of the MH370 disappearance? Share your thoughts in the comments below.